I can still remember the first time I felt that invisible weight pressing down on me, like a quiet force that didn't announce itself, but insisted on steering my every move. It was subtle at first, a whisper in the back of my mind, urging me to stay put, to not reach too far, to keep everything safe and controlled. I didn't realize then that this quiet steering was actually anxiety, gradually weaving itself through my choices, shaping the way I lived without my full awareness. It was as if a part of me was trying to break free, bolder, freer, more alive, but something else gripped me so tightly, I couldn't quite move toward the life I imagined. I wasn't exactly scared of life itself, but the fears tangling inside me made every step feel risky, even dangerous. I started noticing how often I held back. Invitations I didn't accept, projects I hesitated to start, conversations I avoided, not because I lacked desire or talent, but because deep down, I was defending myself against some unseen threat. That invisible hand of anxiety was like a brake on my soul. Yet, for the longest time, I blamed myself. I thought I was simply not trying hard enough, or that I just lacked the courage to live boldly. But beneath that, there was this persistent truth I kept denying. It wasn't about a lack of confidence or ability. It was about fear, a thick, tangled fear that wrapped itself around my willpower so tightly. I couldn't tell where my true self ended and panic began. This fear wasn't just about one thing. It was a chorus of worries humming relentlessly. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if I lose control? What if I'm not enough? It was exhausting and isolating because it felt like it was mine alone to bear. The more I tried to ignore it or shove it aside, the louder it became, casting a shadow over the parts of me that wanted to explore, to create, to simply be present in my own life. I realized that the person I wanted to become, the version of me who could seize what she wanted, who could stand tall in the face of uncertainty, was somewhere inside, waiting, but trapped beneath layers of hesitation and silent alarms. I remember one evening, sitting on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker alive as the sun settled behind the skyline. I felt this strange mix of longing and sadness. The world out there was humming with endless possibilities, yet here I was, stuck behind my own locked door. I whispered to myself, why can't I just step through? What's really holding me back? It wasn't a lack of options or dreams. It was something far more complex and layered. It made me wonder how many moments, how many chances had quietly slipped by simply because I was too afraid to risk stepping beyond my comfort. It wasn't just about avoiding failure. It was about a deeper struggle inside to protect myself from the unknown, from any pain that might come with trying. I started noticing how anxiety masqueraded as safety. It told me, stay where it's familiar. Don't stir the waters. But surprisingly, what felt safe often looked a lot like stagnation. I began to see how this protective instinct was also the very thing keeping me from living fully. That realization was as frightening as it was freeing. It meant I had to confront a truth that was both tender and fierce. The parts of me longing for growth were also the parts one had silenced in the name of preservation. At the same time, I knew I wasn't alone in this. So many of us carry this silent battle every day. The yearning to show up differently, to be seen, to expand, while anxiety quietly clips our wings. It's like an internal struggle that plays out beneath the surface, influencing our choices, our relationships, and the way we experience life's moments. Maybe you recognize it too, the pull between who you know you could be and the invisible force keeping you tethered. That restless tension between your dreams and your fears can feel like a chasm within, stretching wider with every opportunity turned down, every voice muted, every chance delayed. And here's the thing. This isn't just about anxiety as a nuisance or a label. It's about how anxiety silently sculpts the shape of your life, often without your permission. It's about how the brave, vibrant version of yourself that's trying to emerge isn't just some vague possibility, but a vivid reality waiting for your permission to show up. The journey ahead isn't about erasing fear or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about learning how to move forward anyway, how to inhabit your life with presence and courage, even when your heart is pounding and your mind is shouting caution. I'm inviting you now to begin this journey with me, not as someone who's broken or lacking, but as someone profoundly human, who carries both shadow and light within. We'll explore how anxiety shows up in unexpected ways, how it limits us, and how we can start shifting from a place of contraction to one of expansion. Together, we'll meet those hidden corners of hesitation and fear with curiosity and compassion. Because the truth is, the version of you who wants to rise is already here, whispering beneath the noise, waiting for a moment of grace to emerge fully. And that moment, our moment, is now. I once found myself caught in a moment that felt like sinking beneath a still surface, with all that churn hidden underneath. It wasn't a sudden tempest, but a persistent undercurrent pulling me away from the direction I wanted to move. There was a paradox at play. While part of me hungered for new experiences, another part was quietly steering me back toward familiar waters. It wasn't a single fear, but an intricate web that limited my choices in ways I hadn't fully grasped. For example, even when an exciting opportunity emerged, a chance to speak in front of a crowd or try something unfamiliar, I felt an inexplicable urge to retreat or delay. It wasn't hesitation in the ordinary sense. It was a complex dance with emotions that tangled hope and apprehension. One evening, I decided to examine this conflict carefully. I asked myself, could avoidance be disguising itself in some unexpected forms? I realized that the urge to maintain control often manifested as rigid routines and prescribed daily rituals. On the surface, these routines felt grounding and helpful. Yet, beneath, they became barriers, literally fences around my life designed to minimize unpredictability. It was like living inside a fortress where no surprises could breach the walls, but those walls also trapped vibrant parts of me eager to bloom. The irony was striking. What I experienced as protection was secretly the source of my own quiet imprisonment. I remember a vivid moment when I had the chance to attend a networking event that could open doors professionally. In any other mood, I would have felt energized by the possibility. But that day, the thought of walking into a room full of strangers felt like facing a storm with no shelter. My body tensed, my mind raced through a flood of what-ifs. What if I say something awkward? What if no one connects with me? What if I simply freeze? The relentlessness of these swirling doubts left me physically drained and emotionally paralyzed. What struck me most was how quickly my mind equated risk with potential pain, shutting down the natural courage that often rises in the face of challenges. This dynamic began to reveal itself as a subtle thief stealing moments and opportunities one by one. The urge to remain within a safe zone consistently trumped the lure of growth and discovery. I recognized it wasn't a simple fear of failure. It was a deep-seated habit of avoiding disparity between expectation and reality. This inner dialogue whispered, "Stay close, don't stretch too far," convincing me false safety lay in sameness. Yet every decision made under this script folded me into a smaller version of myself. One morning, while hiking alone beneath towering trees, I noticed how the forest itself reflected this paradox. Some trees stretched tall and wide, embracing the sunlight and uncertain weather. Others remained tightly closed, resistant to change, limiting their own expansion. It dawned on me that growth insists on vulnerability. Trees don't wait to be certain of every breeze before they stretch. They allow the risk of storms, of losing branches, because that's how they open themselves to light and space. With that realization, I began asking, what if I, too, could lean into uncertainty, choosing to be spacious even without guarantees? I recall telling a close friend about this internal battle. Her response touched something tender within me. Maybe you're confusing safety with comfort. Safety means knowing you can handle whatever comes, not shrinking away from it. That moment shifted something profound. I saw how I had mistaken comfort, predictable and soft, with real protection, which requires resilience alongside openness. This subtle but powerful distinction urged me to reconsider what it truly meant to be secure, challenging beliefs that had quietly dictated my boundaries. On another occasion, I made a deliberate choice to do something small yet counterintuitive. I said yes to a casual invitation that would expose me to new social dynamics, even though unease buzzed in my chest. The experience wasn't painless. I felt exposed and awkward at times. Still, that discomfort was paired with a strange exhilaration, a sense of life cracking open. What surprised me most was realizing that the anticipated tsunami of distress didn't crash down. Instead, Ripples of nervous energy gradually settled into calm. That day, I started understanding that discomfort can coexist with safety, and sometimes, crossing the border of unease is the very threshold where a new version of ourselves is born. Now, consider how this applies when you face your own choices that seem to be silently governed by caution. Perhaps it's the resistance to voicing your true desires for fear of judgment, or the impulse to postpone important steps because the unknown feels overwhelming. These actions, though subtle, accumulate into a stalled momentum, like a river held back by unseen dams. Growing comes with invitations to dismantle those barriers brick by brick, recognizing them not as enemies, but as signals pointing toward what's been neglected so far within us. Finally, I realized that embracing discomfort isn't a reckless leap into chaos. It's a deliberate redefinition of safety, one that acknowledges uncertainty as an integral partner in our unfolding story. That shift opened a corridor within me, a passage where fear and aspiration no longer battled but walked side by side, allowing me to explore, to risk, and to become more fully alive. This is where transformation begins, in the gentle refusal to let cautiousness dictate the edges of your world. During one particular chapter of my life, a shifting perspective emerged when I encountered an utterly unexpected source of insight, an aging potter named Marta. I met her in a small workshop tucked away in a forgotten corner of town, a place where dust motes danced lazily in golden beams through cracked windows. Marta had hands weathered by decades of shaping clay, her fingers weaving life out of something once shapeless. I visited her seeking simplicity, but what she unveiled went beyond crafting vessels. It was a profound lesson about tension, resistance, and transformation. As she rolled out clay, she spoke softly. You know, the clay isn't just any lump. It holds potential. But under too much pressure, it cracks. Not enough, and it won't shape. It's a delicate balance. Watching her hands coax a fragile, yet firm form from the earth, I felt an uncanny parallel to my own inner struggle. There was a fragile dance between applying energy and yielding to uncertainty. Anxiety, in many ways, exerted a similar kind of force, sometimes too constricting, other times a call to soften and embrace upheaval. Unlike earlier reflections where fear seemed overtly controlling, Marta's analogy led me to understand the nuanced rhythm anxiety plays beneath action and inaction alike. It isn't merely a barrier, but a dynamic tension that can either suffocate growth or sculpt resilience. The presence of discomfort during this molding process doesn't signal failure. Rather, it indicates transformation underway. Anxiety isn't just what we escape, but a material to engage with skillfully if we wish to rise anew. One moment particularly stands out. Marta invited me to try my hand at molding clay. Nervous, I hesitated and exerted too much force initially. Clay split and crumbled beneath my fingers. She smiled gently. You're squeezing what needs to breathe. Encouraging me to breathe deeply and soften my grip, she showed me how subtle adjustments, less rigid grasp, stillness in motion, could gradually reveal a form both strong and supple. This fragile power captured a vital truth for me. Moving through anxiety demands patience with my limits, not fighting them blindly. Later that day, I wandered the nearby streets, feeling a kind of reverberation in my bones, a recognition that personal growth doesn't thrive in a vacuum of absence, but emerges from wrestling with inner tension. There was no instant solution offered, only an invitation to engage differently, to hold space for discomfort without letting it shrink my world. I realized that the grip of my apprehensions wasn't simply a wall to be torn down by sheer will, but a complex landscape to navigate. In my own life, these lessons transformed how I approached what once caused paralysis. When opportunities appeared, the instinct to recoil was no longer met with silent capitulation. Instead, I experimented by treading carefully into new experiences with a mindset of curiosity rather than judgment. For instance, I began attending public speaking classes, not to vanish anxiety, but to embrace it as a companion. Each tremble in my voice or racing heartbeat became a signal to adjust, not to abandon, my path. Another moment of awakening happened during a hiking trip with a close friend. The trail twisted through rocky, uncertain terrain, sometimes forcing us to pause or retrace steps. When I faltered on a steep incline, panic rippled beneath my calm exterior. Yet, instead of succumbing to haste, my friend urged me to slow down, focus on footing, and breathe fully. Her words echoed Marta's gentle wisdom, revealing how navigating challenging terrain, whether physical or emotional, requires more than courage alone. It requires trust in the process and an acceptance that progress can be uneven, even messy. This journey also reshaped how I perceived setbacks. Previously, each stumble felt like confirmation of inadequacy, fueling withdrawal. Gradually, I started treating failures as markers on my evolving map, not as signals to abandon exploration. This shift allowed me to reframe tension and unease as indicators I'm stretching beyond comfort zones. It's not about eliminating anxiety, but redefining my relationship with it, from adversary to a guide, marking where growth pulses strongest. These insights opened a portal to deeper self-compassion. I stopped demanding instant mastery over my emotions and instead nurtured a mindset akin to tending a garden, attending patiently to each sprout, some fragile, others booming unexpectedly. Anxiety became one element in a complex ecosystem of feeling, thought, and will. Rather than detaching from discomfort, I began inhabiting it with kindness and openness. Now, when you feel resistance rising inside as you face decisions or risks, I invite you to view that tension not as a fault line, but as fertile soil. Lean into the paradox where pressure can either fracture or form, where vulnerability becomes the crucible for transformation when met with care. Growth emerges not from denying discomfort, but from a subtle, artful engagement with it. Much like shaping clay demands surrender and intention woven together, so does navigating the delicate dance between fear and freedom within us. This realization helped me glimpse beyond limitation into the vast possibilities waiting beneath unease, crafting an inner resilience as enduring as the vessels Marta fashioned from earth. In a fleeting instant, I found myself standing at a crossroads of uncertainty unlike any I had encountered before. The air shimmered with a tension that pressed against my chest, neither friend nor foe, but somewhere in between, an enigmatic presence urging me forward while simultaneously warning me to retreat. I recalled a moment during a late evening jog when the city's noise faded and the stillness allowed intrusive thoughts to surface. My footsteps slowed, breaths deepened, and suddenly, the hesitation felt less like a barrier and more like an invitation to honor a part of myself that I had long neglected. I began to notice subtle internal agreements made without conscious consent, agreements shaping decisions through unspoken rules engraved by past experience. For instance, in conversations, I often caught myself second-guessing before responding, masking genuine curiosity with rehearsed neutrality. That inner script whispered caution, don't reveal too much, don't seem vulnerable. And in obeying, a layer of muted identity gathered dust. This self-imposed silence wasn't casual. It was a carefully constructed armor against anticipated disappointment or rejection. The intriguing complexity lay in recognizing how this mechanism became a self-reinforcing cycle, where withholding chipped away at authentic connections, thereby intensifying isolation, a paradox I wrestled with quietly every day. One afternoon, I visited a quaint bookstore overflowing with old tomes and scattered notes, an untidy sanctuary of stories. While turning the delicate pages of an obscure journal on human behavior, a passage caught my eye describing how avoidance operates like a shadow puppeteer, subtly manipulating rather than blatantly constraining. The text suggested that escaping discomfort can inadvertently tether us even tighter to our fears. That insight struck home, sparking an awareness about how hidden forms of resistance, such as procrastination or perfectionism, serve as disguised gatekeepers. They cloak themselves in productivity or prudence, yet their effect is immobilizing undercurrents that drain momentum with quiet efficiency. To test this newfound understanding, I challenged myself to observe moments where hesitation crept into choices, especially in areas that sparked excitement but also subtle fear. Planning a trip was once a joy now overshadowed by endless what-ifs and the paralyzing need to control every contingency. Booking flights, packing bags, even picking destinations became exercises in wresting autonomy from creeping doubt. Over time, By acknowledging these tendencies without judgment, I found space to experiment with incremental acts of surrender. Selecting one destination without exhaustive comparison, embracing unpredictability of travel logistics, opening myself to unfamiliar experiences. These shifts tasted liberating. It was as if each small concession chipped away at invisible shackles forged by the illusion of perfect safety. A powerful episode unfolded during a discussion circle I attended, an intimate gathering of individuals sharing their stories of transformation. When my turn came to speak, a surge of apprehension collided with an eagerness to be heard. Instead of retreating, I chose to step into the spotlight with a shaky voice but steady resolve. The vulnerability split open old wounds, but also unveiled a radiant, unfiltered expression of self. Responses brimmed with empathy and shared recognition, dissolving the walls anxiety had layered over authentic dialogue. It revealed that what I had feared, exposure, judgment, failure, was often a distorted story my mind told to keep me confined. Later that night, I journaled reflections about how these interactions seeded resilience and acceptance. This growing familiarity with discomfort began to weaken its grip, not by eliminating fear, but by transforming it into a compass pointing toward previously unexplored facets of courage. The interplay between risk and reward no longer presented itself as a stark binary, but as a fluid dance, gracefully weaving hesitation with boldness. It reshaped my approach to challenges not as threats, but as openings inviting curiosity, creative problem-solving, and bold adaptation. Moreover, this approach illuminated the intricate relationship between control and surrender. In past struggles, clinging to control felt necessary for survival, yet paradoxically, it drained energy and stymied growth. Accepting that some elements remained unpredictable freed me to channel effort into shifting what was malleable, my mindset, my responses, my boundaries. Practicing this balance resembled learning to ride ocean waves rather than resisting their force, moving with the current instead of against it, yielding without surrendering essence. That metaphor shaped a new harmony within me, a grounding in fluidity rather than rigid certainty. Now, picture your own arena of wrestling with hesitation or unseen tethers. What if your impulse to avoid wasn't weakness, but an unacknowledged voice seeking respect? Envision embracing these impulses not as enemies to conquer, but signals to understand. What hidden narratives shape your patterns? By leaning into this deeper inquiry, you invite a dialogue between your comfort and your potential. The path becomes less about overpowering fear and more about weaving through it, developing a graceful momentum that carries you forward even when clarity feels distant. Such journeys demand patience and gentle curiosity, qualities too often undervalued in our rush to fix or overcome. Through my own unfolding, I learned that the spaces anxiety carved within me hold profound clues for freedom, not just obstacles. They are maps leading toward an ever-expanding experience of presence, connection, and authentic expression. Holding this perspective transformed uncertainty into a fertile ground rather than a barren wasteland, cultivating a spirit ready to navigate the uncharted with openness and strength. I remember the afternoon sunlight filtering through the cafe window, casting warm patterns on the table where I sat across from a close friend whose calm demeanor contrasted with the storm inside me. During our conversation, I confessed a recent hesitation to accept a promotion, not from a lack of ambition, but because my mind spun wild stories of potential failure and exposure. She looked thoughtfully into my eyes and said, "What if anxiety isn't your enemy, but part of your creative process?" Her words caught me off guard, planting a seed of curiosity where once grew only resistance. This new perspective unfolded over time like a landscape, gradually revealing hidden paths. Instead of resisting anxious energy, I began experimenting with allowing it to coexist alongside my drive, treating it less as a barrier and more as a signal amplifier. For example, while preparing for a public talk, I noticed heightened pulse and racing thoughts. Instead of pushing these sensations away, I invited them in, observing their textures and rhythms. This shift transformed nervous tension into a source of sharpened focus and heightened presence, like a musician tuning their instrument before a performance, ensuring every note carries vivid emotion. One evening, while journaling beside a flickering candle, I explored the paradox that growth often wears a disguise of vulnerability. It struck me that in avoiding exposure, we risk silencing authentic expression, missing the raw beauty of imperfect unfolding. Memories surfaced of times when vulnerability led to moments of deep connection and creative breakthroughs, moments that anxiety had once warned me to avoid as too risky. I wrote, "Courage is the art of showing up fully, tremble and all." This realization deepened the tension under my skin, revealing it as an intricate dance between protection and expansion. Later, a crisp autumn walk revealed more lessons etched by nature's rhythms. Watching leaves letting go of their branches without resistance, I sensed a metaphor for embracing discomfort's impermanence. Just as a tree surrenders its foliage to invite renewal, I recognized the strength in letting go of the myth that discomfort signals defeat. I recalled a recent project where I stumbled through awkward early attempts but chose to persist. With each revision, the initial unease softened, and new growth emerged in unexpected directions. Nature's relinquishing became a template for reimagining struggle, an essential shedding that births transformation. A vivid instance occurred at a community art workshop where participants painted on large canvases with bold, spontaneous strokes. I hesitated at first, worried my marks would seem clumsy or unskilled among more confident artists. When my turn arrived, anxious whispers flooded my mind, but recalling my friend's words, I plunged into the creative flow, surrendering to the process with no demand for perfection. The resulting artwork felt raw and alive, capturing emotions I hadn't fully acknowledged. Others responded with warmth and encouragement, reinforcing a profound truth. Authentic creation often emerges when defenses dissolve, not when we hide behind polished facades. These encounters nurtured a growing belief that anxiety can function as a magnifier of what matters most to us. Instead of dampening aspiration, it can illuminate areas where growth stirs, demanding attention and care. I began treating anxious moments as invitations to listen deeply to my desires, fears, and deeper self, using them as navigational tools rather than red flags signaling retreat. This approach felt less like battling shadows and more like tuning an inner compass that guides with nuanced clarity through uncertain terrain. Reflecting on relationships, I noticed anxiety frequently whispered caution about trust and openness. Memories surfaced of times I held back my truth, fearing judgment or rejection. Yet, when I chose vulnerability, I often uncovered unexpected empathy and strengthened bonds. In one heartfelt conversation with a sibling, speaking honestly about my struggles dismantled years of distance, opening space for mutual understanding. This experience taught me that anxiety's protective impulse can sometimes disguise itself as emotional barricades, shielding us, but also isolating us from meaningful connection. As these revelations deepened, I confronted a subtle yet powerful hesitation, the urge to rush solutions and fix discomfort. With patience, I learned discomfort can be a long-term companion rather than an enemy to vanquish swiftly. Sitting quietly through uneasy sensations without immediate reaction became a practice that cultivated resilience and wisdom. Instead of fighting every ripple, I learned to ride the waves with measured grace, recognizing each crest and trough as part of a larger ebb toward growth. Now, consider the next time anxiety whispers caution or doubt amid an exciting venture or intimate moment. Could you invite it as a temporary companion rather than an adversary? Imagine meeting that energy with curious inquiry, feeling its texture, tracing its shape, allowing space for your authentic self to emerge alongside trembling vulnerability. By welcoming anxiety not as a blocker, but as a messenger revealing passion, you open pathways to deeper presence and richer, more daring living. This shift doesn't erase discomfort, but transforms it into a dynamic force steering you closer to the freedom and confidence you seek. One evening, I found myself standing on the edge of a dimly lit stage, heart throbbing like a wild drum, the heavy silence pressing against my ears as I prepared to share my story with a crowd I barely knew. In the middle of the room, faces hovered like constellations, each one a mystery, each one holding the potential for connection or rejection. My hands trembled, But beneath the shaking nerves, an unexpected calm started to weave its way through me. This wasn't a triumph over fear, far from it, but an acceptance of its presence. Instead of trying to outrun the pounding anxiety, I chose to ride its waves, to move forward with trembling legs and a shaky voice. The experience carved new grooves in my understanding. Embracing discomfort doesn't erase it. It sculpts resilience through sheer persistence. Later, I went back to that place in my mind where I stored stories of avoidance. One of the most stubborn had to do with vulnerability and exposure. For years, I equated emotional risk with weakness, drawing invisible walls around my deepest desires and fears. Yet, in moments when I cautiously removed even a single stone from those walls, I glimpsed a richer, more textured world. Like stepping through a door that creaked open just slightly to reveal sunlight spilling across a forgotten room, revealing layers of myself I hadn't dared explore. This new understanding prompted a gentle but firm invitation to risk emotional openness with a steady, compassionate curiosity. The turning point crystallized during a weekend retreat nestled in a forest grove. Amid towering trees and whispers of wind, a fellow participant shared her own story of battling anxiety's suffocating grip. Her words, raw and unapologetic, confirmed a truth I had long sensed but struggled to say out loud. Growth often demands entering spaces where the past fearfully guards the gates, she said. But those spaces hold the seeds of freedom, if we find the courage to tend them. As she spoke, the forest around us seemed to lean closer, leaves rustling softly, an almost audible witness to hidden transformation. It dawned on me how often discomfort signals arrival at an inner frontier, not defeat, but a harbinger of new possibility. In the days that followed, I tested this new perspective with small, deliberate acts. Walking to a crowded cafe where I usually retreated stirred tremors of unease, but I lingered a little longer each time. Sitting there, catching fragments of conversations, watching laughter ripple and fade, I connected more deeply with my own presence than before. The habitual urge to flee weakened as I allowed moments of vulnerability to stand still, unjudged. It reminded me of a river slowly carving a canyon, patient, gradual, powerful over time, reshaping the landscape not by force, but by persistent grace. At work, opportunities arose that once would have sent me hiding in shadows. A last-minute project requiring presentations and collaboration now tempted me with both dread and intrigue. Instead of retreating, I crafted a plan focusing on incremental exposure. A brief pitch with a trusted colleague, a practice talk before a small team, each step stretching my comfort just enough to remain manageable. This incremental approach became a lifeline, transforming paralyzing anticipation into a series of navigable challenges. With every small victory, the walls of hesitation receded, affording glimpses of the confident self I yearned to inhabit. Conversations with friends deepened this evolving relationship with anxiety. One particularly candid night, a close companion shared his own tangled dance with fear, describing it as a persistent shadow that lingers, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but never silent. His metaphor resonated, illuminating my own dance. Anxiety isn't an adversary to vanquish in a single battle, but a recurring presence requiring ongoing awareness and negotiation. Our stories intertwined, highlighting the shared human experience beneath individual struggles, reminding me that vulnerability is a courageous bridge rather than a dividing line. A striking revelation emerged in the form of an unexpected metaphor during a solitary morning hike. I noticed a cluster of wildflowers clinging to the edge of a rocky cliff, their petals battered but vibrant despite relentless winds. Their survival defied my assumptions about strength, which often equated to rigid control or invulnerability. Instead, these blossoms displayed resilience through adaptability, bending, swaying, enduring, and beauty born from imperfection. This fragile tenacity inspired a subtle redefinition in my mind. Courage needn't look like fearlessness. Sometimes it is the quiet persistence to keep standing despite uncertainty and discomfort. Now, consider the moments when anxiety signals you to stop or retreat. What if those signals were guiding you toward the edges of growth, beckoning you to test your limits without demanding conquest? Imagine granting yourself permission to explore discomfort with a kind of calm curiosity, noticing the sensations, thoughts, and images it stirs, without rushing judgment or escape. In those moments, discomfort becomes less a chain and more a compass, leading toward hidden strengths and undiscovered potentials. This nuanced engagement invites an awakening, the realization that forward movement can coexist with unease, crafting a path that honors both your humanity and your hunger for transformation. Reflecting on this journey so far, I find myself standing at a threshold illuminated not by sudden clarity, but by the gradual weaving together of threads once scattered and fragmented. The path behind me is textured with the subtle interplay of tension and release, a choreography between hesitation and desire that has quietly reshaped my inner landscape. It's as if I've been tracing a complex mosaic whose pieces begin to resonate when viewed from a distance, each shape and hue holding significance that only emerges through patient contemplation. In the quieter moments, I've sensed the rhythm beneath the surface, a pulse that both challenges and invites. This pulse doesn't command or coerce. It murmurs, testing the boundaries of comfort and beckoning toward an expanse where vulnerability feels less like exposure and more like an opening. I recall sitting alone, the night air wrapping around me like a familiar but enigmatic cloak, as I wrestled internally with the contradiction between cautious withdrawal and a yearning for genuine presence. That tension, far from a stagnant force, spun out like an intricate dance, each step forward unfolding into new textures of courage that had once seemed unreachable. The interplay of restraint and expansion reveals itself much like the subtle shifting of tides, never abrupt, but persistently transformative. There's an art to yielding with intention that I'm just beginning to grasp, a balance between holding steady and allowing cracks where light spills through. It reminds me of a quiet breeze threading through dense forest foliage, soft enough to soothe yet insistent enough to coax the leaves into motion. This breath of change is not about dismantling walls overnight, but about cultivating an internal landscape where discomfort doesn't imprison but fertilizes growth. What draws me deeper still is the realization that these internal movements shape not only how we approach our fears, but redefine the very texture of our experience. It's a subtle alchemy where doubt is not discarded but transmuted, blending its sharp edges with newfound curiosity. In doing so, the lines between struggle and discovery blur, revealing a continuum instead of a division. The internal dialogue shifts, no longer a battleground of opposing forces, but a nuanced conversation embracing complexity. This evolution invites an embrace of imperfections, not as flaws to be eradicated, but as essential fibers woven into the fabric of wholeness. In engaging this ever-unfolding process, I've become attuned to whispers beneath hesitation, the quiet urgings that signal readiness to navigate uncharted terrain. These whispers exist in the spaces where fear and hope converse, where the heart beats unevenly, yet steadily toward growth. Trust, then, is no longer a destination but a practice, cultivated through repeated acts of presence and gentleness with oneself. It's a commitment to remain open amidst uncertainty, inviting resilience to rise organically rather than through force. As I carry these impressions forward, I notice how they ripple outward, coloring the way I relate to others and to moments suspended between fear and possibility. The delicate negotiation within becomes a shared human dance, echoing in the spaces where connection can spark despite vulnerability's shadow. It fosters an intimacy not predicated on perfection but on authentic revelation, where voices tremble but are never silenced. This shared terrain between isolation and communion pulses with the potential to transform our understanding of strength and courage. Standing here now, I recognize the subtle shift in perspective as akin to watching dawn spread its colors slowly across the horizon, not in a sudden blaze, but in a gentle unfolding that promises new beginnings. It is a gesture of trust extended toward the unseen, an invitation to explore complexity with tenderness and resolve. And so, with the quiet hum of these insights beneath my skin, I prepare to step further, aware that the journey continues beyond what words can fully capture, led by a presence both steadfast and fluid. ready to follow where this path awakens within us. On nights when silence stretches long and the familiar pang of hesitation settles in my chest, I've come to understand something profound. The parts of me shrouded in anxiety are not obstacles to obliterate, but whispers yearning to be heard. I remember moments when I wanted nothing more than to hide away, convinced that stepping into the unknown meant surrendering safety. Yet, somewhere beneath the trembling uncertainty, a flicker of something unbreakable beckoned, a quiet insistence that my story was unfinished, that a richer version of me awaited discovery. Embracing this paradox, I realized growth does not arrive in absence of unease but alongside it, almost as if discomfort paints the very contours of expansion. This inner interplay reminds me of a garden left untamed through seasons of doubt and withdrawal. Over time, nature's resilience reveals itself in subtle green shoots bursting through cracked stone and forgotten soil. Our human hearts, in parallels, nurture seeds of courage that flutter silently beneath layers of apprehension. I've learned that these seeds often require tenderness, patience, and honest attention to awaken. Sometimes, tending the self means allowing small acts of vulnerability, words spoken despite trembling lips, steps taken despite pounding doubts, to water roots long thought barren. These moments create a mosaic of transformation, each shard vital in shaping who we might become. On one afternoon, a friend's gentle voice broke through my hesitations. "You have lived in half-light for too long. Why deny the whole spectrum of your own brightness?" His question reframed my reluctance as a choice made not from limitation, but from learned avoidance. That shift invited me to look beyond comfort's deceptive embrace and toward the uncertain terrain where true self-discovery unfolds. It became clear that strength grows not in sanitized safety, but within the wild edges where shadows and light coexist. It is in these borders that I've met parts of myself weighted down yet eager, hesitant yet yearning, that dared me to keep walking despite not seeing the path ahead clearly. Days followed when I practiced this delicate act of leaning into the unknown, sometimes faltering, often unsure. I found courage did not roar but whispered, a soft, persistent pulse urging me forward. In those periods, even when doubt wrapped tightly around me like a thick fog, I learned to become a companion to my own discomfort. Listening closely to what was held beneath trembling thoughts, I discovered layers of hope, forgotten dreams, and unspoken desires waiting patiently for acknowledgement. Each moment of self-kindness transformed the crushing weight of anxiety into fuel for movement, allowing me to reclaim fragments of freedom I thought lost. I envision you now encountering your own hesitations, those invisible threads that pull you back just as you reach forward. In these moments, you might try to welcome ambiguity as an old acquaintance rather than an adversary. Instead of pushing away the tremors coursing through your mind and body, invite them into your awareness like weather passing through a vast sky, fleeting, natural, part of a larger landscape. By doing so, you honor the complexity of your experience without forcing resolution or judgment. This gentle presence, I've found, lays the groundwork for courageous choices that originate not from absence of fear, but from a deeper trust in one's own resilience. What feels most vibrant to me now is the possibility that within the tension itself lies a kind of invitation, a call to engage, to dwell, and to transform. When we step into this space, we participate in a dance ancient and universal, where vulnerability intertwines with bravery, where failure is a teacher, and where growth blossoms amid uncertainty. This is not a journey of perfection or conquest, but one of living authentically regardless of discomfort. It's an ongoing commitment to honor all parts of ourselves, fractured, radiant, cautious, and courageous, allowing them to coexist and co-create the stories we tell ourselves and the world. If I could leave a message from this place I've come to inhabit, it would be this: when anxiety tugs at your sleeves, lean in softly, listen to its tale, and let it guide you not to safety alone, but toward your vastness. You are not bound to a lesser version of yourself by invisible chains, but invited to awaken through the very discomfort you once feared. Embrace it, for in doing so, you awaken the hero within, someone who moves forward not in spite of trembling, but alongside it, weaving tenderness into every bold step. And in this weaving, I believe, lies the profound truth that can set us free.